Hi everyone, Alexis De Leon here, and today we're going to be learning about social penetration theory. Let's go. Beginning with a little bit of background, the theory was created by Erwin Altman and Dalmas Taylor in 1973. They're both social psychologists, and this theory follows a post-positivism paradigm, per usual. Snapshot, relationships go through sequential stages as they develop and dissolve. Alright, before we begin, let's start with an activity. You're at a work event. You've been with the company for 12 years, and in that time, 3 of your coworkers have been working alongside you the entire time, 3 have worked with you for half the time, and 2 of your coworkers just started a few months ago. As you make your way through the event chatting with each group of coworkers, what are some conversation topics you'd bring up? Go ahead and pause the video, think on this for a moment, and we'll be right back. So our reading, they use a lot of Shrek references, so I thought it appropriate to use the Shrek imagery, and you'll see why when we get to the onion model, of course. But for now, you need to know the 4 stages of SPT. So we begin with stage 1, which is orientation. Polite greetings, small talk, all parties involved have their guard up, and just like orientation when you're going to college, you're starting a new job, this is really where you're learning about the interactant. You're dipping the toes in. Are they polite? Are there superficial things that you like about them? Are they, smiling when you're talking to them, looking like they're paying attention? And also, if we recall communication accommodation theory that I spoke on last time, I'm connecting the dots and thinking that orientation is also where most of CAT will happen, because it seems that when you're first meeting someone, you want to pass the vibe check, as the youths say. So this is where you're accommodating for the manner of interacting here in stage 1. Then we move into stage 2, which is exploratory affective exchange. Your guard is lowered a little bit, topics of conversation go beyond small talk, and the mood is more friendly. So this isn't your first interaction with this person or persons. Both parties are more relaxed, more themselves. This is probably a time when maybe a few jokes get thrown in. You get to start testing out some humor. And maybe you begin talking about siblings or spouse, your family, essentially. Things like favorite TV shows. The topics are also broadened. You can talk about more things, not just how's the weather. But the depth of them is still not very far, not very deep. So then we move into stage 3, which is effective exchange. Many barriers are broken down here, lots of open exchange happening. And this stage is most important because it's what characterizes close friends and romantic relationships. So you've both hung out outside of the original social situations a few times, many times maybe. You both enjoy each other's company. Lots of topics being talked about here. This is also when religion and politics, you feel safe enough to talk about that probably. And so essentially stage 3, we have a lot of trust between both interactants or the interactants. And then of course, do you feel safe enough to move into a romantic relationship here? And then finally, you'd get stage 4, which is stable exchange. There's a richness of interactions with the interactants. They understand each other very well here. Something to note here too is this is where nonverbal communication comes into play. Y'all know each other so well, or you're so comfortable with each other. At this point, a glance can help. You're sharing secrets, things that you only trust with people you trust and someone that you plan to have in your future or for the foreseeable future. This also brings to mind the quote that's like, we have to remain friends because you know too much. That would definitely be stable exchange area. But yeah, this is also where, you're at the party and you look across the room and your friend gives you the like, and you're like, oh, I think it's time to go. Time to go look. Okay, important things to note about the stages of SPT. There may be some back and forth between the stages, some ebb and flow. especially early on. You're not too sure about them. Maybe we'll hang out again. They were all right. Okay, I guess they're a little cooler now. They did something cool. They said something I liked. Or they said something that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I'm going to take a break from hanging with them for a little bit. But even with back and forth, essentially the SPT states that relationships happen on a sequential level, so in order. You're not skipping from one step to step 4. Just like in life, you're not jumping stairs going up. Too risky. A lot of risk involved. You could hurt yourself. And just as building a relationship goes through the levels, going like through the stages 1 through 4, getting out or dissolving the relationship also goes through the same levels, 1 through 4, just in reverse. All right, so that brings us to breadth and depth of SPT. So within each of the 4 stages, we have breadth and depth. Try saying that a million times fast. Basically, how many topics you can cover, and as that widens or becomes more shallow, moving through the steps, and then the depth. So think of, I have an example here. During orientation stage, you talk about what you're studying in school, maybe your hometown, the weather, etc. And then as you move into EAE, you might talk about why you chose your major. And then that might lead to what sparks passion on the topic that you're studying. You'll also add more to the conversation. Let's say, you talk about your hometown, but, once you reach effective exchange, you're talking about topics that also include politics and religion. And you might then talk about why you left your hometown. Maybe it's a touchy subject, so you're getting further into things that are more emotional. And as you move through stable exchange, just like it states, you only share these kinds of deep, intimate thoughts with a stable connection, a stable relationship. So it's not like you're just telling all your secrets out willy-nilly to someone you're never going to see again, or someone that you don't trust to know you in that way. And so it's all about your comfort level. And of course, speaking of comfort level, that will help us decide on self-disclosure and reciprocity. So self-disclosure, a lot like what it sounds like. Typically, the social norm is each person reveals something about themselves, and the other person will reply with similar information. So, you're self-disclosing something, and then you expect kind of something in return, tit for tat, as they say. And even if it isn't shared immediately in that moment, because sometimes, with people you trust, they tend to stop and listen and kind of give you that space to let that marinate. You've ever had those conversations with people where it feels like they're just waiting to respond with what they're going to respond with? It almost feels like, are you even listening to me, or are you just trying to listen to yourself? So if they don't immediately reciprocate giving a secret about themselves or self-disclosing something also personal, it is said that they will acknowledge it later on. So, you might be on another hangout or a date, and, you're walking home together or something, and they say, hey, remember last week when you were talking about, your relationship with your parents? I had something similar happen with X, Y, and Z, something like that. So it will be acknowledged later, that reciprocity. So, also to note, interactants will discuss trivial topics before personal information. Of course, easy to talk about your hobbies. So what do you like to do? Quick question, versus your hopes and your fears. You're not giving people all your dreams, what you thought your life would look like on orientation stage. And then, of course, as you move through the stages, the rate of exchange of information also slows as you push through the layers of the social onion. And so I like to think of it as just the same as when you're trying to reach the top of a mountain or you're scuba diving to the bottom of an iceberg. It will always get harder to get to things that are harder to reach. And, as they say, if it's worth it, it's going to take longer to get there. And here we are, the infamous onion model. And you can really just see, one, we have breadth and depth being shown. So there's a lot of topics in the outside of the onion that you can talk about, but it's all kind of superficial public knowledge. And really the onion model is just demonstrating the 4 stages that we kind of talked about. So as you work your way through the onion, you start, superficial, also just, same as public, what you see, their hair, their eye color, their height, and then you meet a few more times and you start learning some just straight facts about them, biographical, like we said, your studies, maybe hobbies, a little bit of likes, light humor. And then as we get further in the onion, we get a little bit deeper, your attitude towards things, your ideas, political, religious beliefs. Getting a little further in, we have hopes and fears. I mean, you're probably really not talking about fears until very deep into the onion. And then, of course, the center of the onion, which few people get to, as we stated, if they ever make it there. And that's your deepest, darkest secrets, your truths. And these are things you might not tell your family. You might only tell a best friend, best friends, maybe only your significant other. So that's really up to you on how deep someone gets into the onion. So this brings me to stages of relationship deterioration. And while Altman and Taylor do refer to relationship deterioration and dissolution as social depenetration, and they basically claimed that it was a mirror of the penetration process. So essentially, relationships deteriorate because the partners decrease intimate self-disclosure, and the topics that they talk about decrease. I mean, there's less communication between the two. However, there's a lot of debate around the deterioration part of the relationship. Many people also believe, you can't unknow someone, but you could possibly find that they have changed and you no longer know them as well, and they're not letting you into their deep secrets anymore. However, Knapp and Vangelis, which were two scholars as well in 1978, kind of added to the development of deterioration. And these are the steps that you have here, but we won't dive too deep into them. I just wanted to bring them to everyone's conscious mind so we're all aware that there is also the other side of the steps. So just as you came in, you could come out according to the theory, but we will see more of that, I believe, later on as we dive deeper into the social theories. Research and application continued. Some other suggested studies are how social media can play a role in relationships. That's a big one. A lot of online dating. Does Facebook official add some fifth step in the relationship process? I mean, there was a time when making it Facebook official was very big, very popular. Relationships in the LGBTQIA plus community. And then also looking at voluntary versus versus involuntary, which is voluntary would be like your friends, significant other, people you can choose, versus involuntary is your family, your coworkers, you don't really get to choose them. And looking at those relationships and the stages they go through. And then also, does the culture that relationship is developed in matter, which I thought was fascinating. So say getting to know each other in the United States versus Japan versus Afghanistan, things like, or the Middle East in general. There's a lot more lockdown on relationships there. So interesting to look at. And I have this picture from Love is Blind, a reality TV show. If you watch it, listen, guilty. We're moving through the stages. You're learning more about me. But after learning about social penetration theory, I'm starting to think that Love is Blind is just a huge study ploy on SPT. And it allows for a less morally conflicting way to look at it. These participants have all signed up. As you can imagine, it is difficult. There's not as much research on SPT, just given the fact that, one, some relationships can be really long, and that's a lot of study. Who's got that kind of time or money to study that? Also, who's going to allow you into their lives for that long? So if you don't know about Love is Blind, basically they put you in these things called the pods, and you start talking to someone of the opposite sex because the other people are all interested in dating, finding the love of their life, supposedly. and you ask each other questions, again, they are literally moving through the steps. Orientation, they're just meeting, superficial, and then they hang out in these pods. They can't see each other. They can only hear each other's voices, and they ask questions and just have conversations in the pods until they reach a moment when they want to choose someone. And if that person also chooses them as their main person, then they finally get to meet in person, and they go through a whole new set of problems when they finally get to see each other in person. Fascinating. And now that I know this theory, I'm gonna watch the show for scholarly reasons, of course. All right, so in conclusion, relationships go through sequential stages as they develop and dissolve. And while they can sway between stages back and forth, remember the ebb and flow, they generally go in order due to the risky nature of skipping steps. It is dangerous to leap up the stairs or to skip steps. You could hurt yourself, and just like in life, you could hurt yourself skipping steps when building a relationship. And the human body is all about minimizing damage to itself. So I got this cute little picture here because ogres are like onions, and also people are like onions, aka relationship building. So now we've learned about the social penetration theory, and I hope that you have enjoyed. Thank you.